Imagine a time when every housewife in Britain scrubbed her front doorstep on her knees each morning with a block of crushed sandstone, and leftover tea leaves were scattered across the floors before sweeping. Today we take a look at 15 forgotten British habits that kept every home spotless, no products needed. In the mill towns of northern England, from the 1860s through the 1950s, a small block the size of a bar of soap was the most important cleaning tool a woman owned. The donkey stone, named after the original donkey brand trademark of Edward Reed and Son in Manchester, was made from a mixture of crushed sandstone, cement, bleach powder, and water. Housewives would dampen the stone and rub it along the leading edge of their front doorstep and surrounding flagstones, leaving behind a clean, decorative border in white, cream, or brown, depending on the stone used. The ritual was as much about social standing as cleanliness. Neighbors could see at a glance who had done her step that morning and who had not. At its peak in the 1930s, the Eli Whaley factory in Ashton-under-Lyne alone produced 2.5 million donkey stones per year. As paved streets and modern detergents arrived, the practice gradually disappeared by the 1960s. The humble tea leaf, after it had brewed its last cup, served a second life as one of the most widely used cleaning tools in British homes. Used tea leaves, squeezed until nearly dry, were scattered across bare floorboards or rugs before sweeping. The damp leaves acted as tiny magnets for dust and fine debris, binding the particles so they could be swept up rather than scattered back into the air. In working-class homes where coal fires sent a constant film of soot across every surface, this was not a luxury, but a necessity. The method worked on stone, wood, and oilcloth floors alike, and in homes with rugs, the leaves were sprinkled over the fabric before the rug was taken outside and beaten. Some households added bicarbonate of soda to the leaves for extra freshness. The practice was so widespread that household manuals from the 1860s onward listed it as standard advice, and it persisted well into the early 20th century in homes across Britain. Long before the invention of commercial furniture polish, British housekeepers made their own from 3 simple ingredients. Beeswax, vinegar, and linseed oil were blended together into a thick paste that could be rubbed into mahogany, oak, and walnut with a soft cloth. A second clean cloth, carefully ironed to remove any creases, was then used to buff the surface to a deep shine. The ironing was not vanity. Creased cloths left streaks and uneven patches on the wood. In wealthier Victorian homes, this polishing ritual was carried out weekly by servants as part of the regular household routine. The beeswax sealed the grain, the vinegar cut through the thin film of grime deposited by coal fires and oil lamps, and the linseed oil restored moisture to the wood. English Heritage tested this exact Victorian recipe at several of its historic properties and found it outperformed many modern alternatives. Today, artisan furniture polish makers still use beeswax and turpentine formulations based on these original recipes. If you walked into a Victorian kitchen in the 1870s, one of the first tasks you would see performed each morning was blackleading the grate. Every cast iron fireplace, cooking range, and stove in the house required a coating of black lead, a paste made from powdered graphite mixed with a small amount of water or turpentine. The mixture was applied with a stiff bristle brush, left to dry for several minutes, and then buffed vigorously with a second, softer brush until the iron gleamed with a deep silver-black luster. In a house with 7 or 8 fireplaces, this job alone could take over an hour. The graphite not only gave the iron a handsome finish, but also sealed the surface against rust, which was a constant threat in the damp British climate. As gas and electric heating replaced open fires through the 20th century, blackleading became one of the first domestic rituals to vanish. The hearthstone was a simple block of abrasive stone, sometimes made from compressed pipe clay or whiting chalk, used to scrub and whiten stone floors, steps, and hearths across Britain. In the 18th and 19th centuries, street vendors in London sold these stones from handcarts, and in Lancashire, a specialized trade of sand sellers known as sand knockers crushed sandstone rock specifically for domestic floor cleaning. The method was labor-intensive. After scrubbing the flagstones with hot, soapy water, the housewife would rub the damp hearthstone across the surface leaving behind a thin white film that dried to give the floor a clean, uniform appearance. A heavy scouring stone with a long wooden handle was sometimes used to grind the mixture into the flags for an even finish. Today, the telltale whitened edges can still be seen on old flagstone floors in heritage cottages across Yorkshire and Lancashire, a faint reminder of this weekly ritual. As linoleum and fitted carpets became affordable in the early 20th century, stone floor scouring largely disappeared from British domestic life. Before detergent existed, white vinegar was the most versatile cleaning agent in a British household. Mixed with water, it cut through grease on kitchen surfaces and removed burnt food from copper pans and iron pots. Diluted in a basin, it served as a streak-free window cleaner, often applied with a soft cloth, and then buffed dry with rolled-up newspaper. The acidity in the vinegar broke down the alkaline residue left by coal smoke, which coated nearly every surface in an industrial-era British home. Vinegar also functioned as a mild antiseptic, and it was routinely used to wipe down larder shelves where meat and dairy were stored without refrigeration. Combined with salt, it became the standard polish for brass door furniture, letterboxes, candlesticks, and copper cookware throughout the Victorian period. If you had a single bottle of anything in your scullery cupboard, it was almost certainly vinegar. The chemical principle was simple. The acetic acid dissolved the greenish layer of oxidation, while the salt provided a gentle abrasive action. If you lived in a British terraced house in the 1920s, your mother or grandmother almost certainly cleaned the wallpaper with bread. A thick slice of fresh white bread, pressed firmly against the wall and drawn downward in a single stroke, would lift soot, dust, and grime from patterned wallpaper without tearing or staining it. The soft, slightly moist crumb acted as a gentle adhesive that picked up surface dirt the way a modern lint roller removes pet hair. Stale bread was avoided because its harder texture could scratch delicate printed patterns. English Heritage tested this method during conservation work at its historic properties and confirmed it was effective on period wallpapers. The technique was recommended in household manuals from the 1850s onward, and some households kept an alternative method in reserve: scattering dry oatmeal across the wallpaper and then sweeping it off with a feather duster or soft broom to absorb grease and soot. One of the most physically demanding cleaning habits in the British home was the weekly carpet beating. Because wall-to-wall fitted carpet was rare before the mid-20th century, most British households used loose rugs and runners that could be lifted, carried outside, and hung over a washing line or sturdy wooden frame. A carpet beater, typically made from woven rattan or twisted wire attached to a wooden handle, was used to strike the rug repeatedly until no more dust rose from the fabric. In industrial towns where coal soot permeated every fiber, this was grueling work that could take an entire morning for a household with several large rugs. During winter months, some households dragged their rugs across fresh snow, which absorbed the surface dirt and left the fabric noticeably cleaner. As electric vacuum cleaners became common in British households from the 1930s onward, the carpet beater gradually disappeared from the back garden. Before the era of stainless steel, British households kept their carbon steel knives sharp and gleaming using a block of compressed calcium silicate known as bath brick. Produced in Bridgewater, Somerset, from the fine silt deposits of the River Parrett, these pale yellow bricks were manufactured from the late 18th century onward. The brick was rubbed across a flat wooden knife board, leaving behind a fine abrasive powder, and the blade was then drawn back and forth through this grit until clean and polished. Emery powder, a darker abrasive made from ground aluminium oxide, was also used for heavier tarnish. Every middle-class household kept a dedicated knife board and bath brick in the scullery, and cleaning the household cutlery was a daily chore assigned to the lowest-ranking kitchen servant. As stainless steel cutlery became standard from the 1920s onward, the bath brick and knife board fell out of use entirely. Though original bath bricks still occasionally turn up at antique fairs in the West Country, in the decades before commercial disinfectants, soot from the chimney served a surprising second purpose in British homes. After the chimney sweep had finished his work, the collected soot was not thrown away. Rich in ammonia salts and nitrogenous compounds, it was mixed with water and used as a fertilizer in kitchen gardens across the country. In the early 19th century, chimneys in a typical British home were swept as often as 4 times per year, producing a substantial supply of this material. The sweep himself often sold surplus soot to households and market gardeners who prized it for enriching soil. Beyond the garden, soot mixed with grease was sometimes used to seal gaps in floorboards, and its dark residue was rubbed into hearthstones in some regions to create a uniform black finish rather than a white one. As coal fires declined through the 20th century, the domestic supply of chimney soot dried up, along with all its secondary uses. If you pull up floorboards in an old Victorian terrace today, you may still find darkened gaps where soot and grease once served as a makeshift sealant. Skimmed milk was a standard floor cleaner for stone surfaces in British homes from the 18th century well into the Victorian era. After the cream had been separated for butter making, the thin remaining liquid was applied to flagstone floors with a scrubbing brush, worked into the surface on hands and knees, and left to dry. The casein protein in the milk bonded with the stone, leaving behind a subtle, smooth sheen that resisted dirt and gave the flags a slightly polished appearance. The method made practical sense in a rural economy where skimmed milk was a byproduct of butter and cheese production and had little other value. English Heritage confirmed the effectiveness of this technique when conservators at Broadsworth Hall in Yorkshire used skimmed milk on the original stone floors and found the results superior to modern cleaning products. The method required no rinsing and produced no chemical residue, making it practical for households where water itself had to be carried from a well or pump up to 1/3 of a mile away. From the medieval period right through to the mid-20th century, British households controlled odors and repelled insects using dried herbs and flowers. Lavender was the most common, tied into small fabric sachets and placed inside wardrobes, linen cupboards, and dresser drawers to keep moths away from wool and cotton. Dried rosemary and thyme were scattered across stone floors before sweeping, releasing their essential oils as they were crushed underfoot. In larger homes, pomanders made from oranges studded with whole cloves were hung in closets and hallways, the combination of citrus oil and eugenol from the cloves acting as a natural insect deterrent. This practice had deep roots. As far back as the medieval period, households scattered fresh rushes and aromatic herbs across their floors for both fragrance and cleanliness. The Victorian refinement was to concentrate these herbs into sachets and pomanders rather than strewing them loose, a practice that faded as synthetic mothballs and chemical air fresheners became widely available after the Second World War. If you grew up in a British household before the 1950s, you would remember the ritual of the Monday wash day. Laundry was not cleaned with detergent, but with flakes shaved from a block of carbolic soap, dissolved in water heated on the kitchen range or in a copper boiler. The clothes were agitated by hand using a dolly, a wooden tool with a long handle, and a set of legs or a cone-shaped head that was twisted and plunged into the tub to work soap through the fabric. A corrugated washboard provided a surface for scrubbing heavy stains by hand. Washing soda crystals softened the hard water common in much of England, and blue bags, small pouches of synthetic ultramarine dye, were added to the final rinse to counteract the yellowing of white cotton and linen. The entire process, from heating water to wringing and hanging, could take a full day. As electric washing machines became affordable in British homes through the 1950s and 60s, the dolly tub and washboard were retired to garden sheds and antique shops. Before the germ theory of disease was widely understood, British households relied on carbolic acid as their primary disinfectant. After Louis Pasteur demonstrated in 1860 that decay was caused by airborne organisms, the idea that germs could be fought through cleaning took hold across Victorian Britain. Carbolic acid, derived from coal tar, was sold in liquid and powdered form at chemist shops and was also available mixed into bars of carbolic soap. Floors, drains, sinks, and lavatories were scrubbed with carbolic solution, and the sharp, medicinal smell it left behind became synonymous with cleanliness in the British mind. Carbolic soap remained a household staple well into the 20th century, used for everything from scrubbing kitchen floors to washing hands and even bathing. The block of pale brown sunlight carbolic soap sitting on the edge of the kitchen sink was a fixture in working-class homes for decades, long before liquid detergents and antibacterial sprays took its place. The Victorian tradition of the annual spring clean was not a casual weekend project, but a weeks-long overhaul of the entire house. The work began at the top floor and moved downward, room by room. Furniture was carried out, curtains were taken down and washed, ceilings were whitewashed, walls were scrubbed or the wallpaper cleaned, and every floor was scoured on hands and knees. Lighting fixtures, whether oil lamps, gas fittings, or candle holders, were dismantled and polished individually because open flames deposited a layer of soot and tarnish on every metal surface in the home. Wooden floors received a fresh coat of beeswax and turpentine, and stone floors were scrubbed with sand and hot lye made from wood ash. The entire exercise was driven by the reality of living with coal heating and open flame lighting, which left months of accumulated grime on every surface from floor to ceiling. As central heating and electric lighting removed the primary sources of indoor soot, the intensive spring clean gradually softened into the lighter tradition most households follow today. So which of these 15 old British cleaning habits would you bring back if you could? Drop a comment below to tell us your pick. And if you enjoyed this video, go ahead and watch the next one right here, and remember to like and subscribe. It really helps a small channel.